Okay, can you hear me? Cool. All right. So I'm Rob Mecardo. I am a marketing manager with Dell Technologies, Dell Infrastructure Solutions Group. We are talking today about Azure Arc and Azure Arc-enabled vSphere. My actual technical expert is Rob Saunders, and he could not be here today, wasn't able to travel. So the way we went ahead and did this is we went ahead and just recorded a session where he and I just have a little bit of a conversation about what Dell and Microsoft and VMware are all working on together around Azure Arc and validated systems. So let's just go ahead and present that.
Hey, Rod, thanks for having me. I wanted to talk a little bit about Azure Arc and some of the vCenter tooling that's integrated with Azure Arc as part of Azure Arc. But real quickly, I wanted to at least first set the stage with what the heck is Azure Arc? Well, it's a lot of different swim lanes that I have on the screen here. Starting on the top left, there's kind of the infrastructure gray bar there. So we have Azure Arc for servers and optionally SQL Server. There's Azure Arc for VMM. There's Azure Arc for VMware vCenter. That's why we're here today. It still is officially in public preview. And there's Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes, and that's from the infrastructure side. And then we move kind of over to the right with the gray bar there. And we have future, which is, I would say, TBD. A lot of the Microsoft tooling will be delivered here starting now and in the future as containerized workloads. So that's kind of why we have that empty area there. Microsoft is all in on this type of technology. We have app services, which is a lot of what you get in Azure right now, logic apps, event grids, function, and then Azure Arc-enabled data services on the far right, which is where I spend a lot of my time, in addition to the VMware vCenter piece and working through SQL MI and Postgres and that layer cake there. Everything on the right does require Kubernetes as a foundation. Of course, Dell does a great job there. Of course, VMware also does a great job there. So you can see a lot of pieces kind of you can start with one, you can use all of these, but that's all what makes up Azure Arc. And Azure Arc is all about workloads on premises, behind the client firewall. Big deal. So let's jump into Azure Arc-enabled VMware vSphere. What the heck is that, Rob? Well, that is vCenter surfaced in Azure, in the Azure portal. So yes, overused phrase, single pane of glass, single pane view there, one of the bullets we have listed there. Virtual machine lifecycle, role-based access control. We have some clients right now that are really truly doing hybrid. Machines on premises with vCenter on ESXi hosts, but they also have machines in Azure. They need a consistent experience, a consistent way to not only deploy, to manage, keep up to date. That's the Azure Management Services. That is really, really awesome to bring everything together. And you'll see that here at the very end. We'll jump and show a quick demo, show that live and in person from one of my labs. So how does this all work? Well, down here at the kind of the bottom third, we have this Azure Arc resource bridge, and you'll see what that is. It's nothing more than an OVA that deploys down to vCenter. And when you first build this resource bridge, or when you first hook up your ESXi host, you literally go to the Azure portal, you put in your vCenter credentials, very simple, and what's generated is some PowerShell. You take that PowerShell, you save it, or you just copy it and paste it to your local jump host, and you run it. And it takes about 20, 30 minutes to run, to actually download, deploy, and hook up that resource bridge. Now that resource bridge, as you can see there, is the glue between VMware vCenter and everything up in ARM, Azure Resource Manager. There, that is the hook between the two. What you have, telemetry, billing, and of course, you'll see what you can light up functionality-wise with regards to network, disk, machines, et cetera, that are Arc-enabled, yes or no. I'll show you, it's super easy to do. But that is the glue that is in the middle that's deployed to your vCenter environment. That's how that works. Not really all that hard, but there is a lot of tooling. In fact, I was working with this project even when it was private preview, and the guys are great. The Microsoft teams are great. There are a lot of old VMware guys that are now helping put this together. So it's pretty awesome. As I mentioned, easy onboarding, and there's really very low overhead with that resource bridge. That's what really brings this product to the table and makes it shine. And then one more piece we wanted to talk about before we get to the demo is, and this is a little bit of a, let's call it an acronym salad. So Azure Stack HCI with AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, and Azure Arc over the top. Well, that's pretty awesome. I actually wrote a paper on that with one more probably slash to the right was Azure Arc-enabled data services with everything on that stack. And this is the stack. So of course, our Dell AX nodes at the bottom, Azure Stack HCI as the OS, Azure Kubernetes Service or AKS deployed. Then we have the 3 there, data services. And you really use a lot of the UIs that you're familiar with. If you're using data services, SSMS, you have Azure Data Studio. Of course, you're using PowerShell. Of course, you're using Azure CLI. I'm pretty happy that we're scripting again, because now I can script everything out. I can check everything into Git. I can pull it from Jenkins pipelines. I can deploy at will. I can rinse, repeat at will. That's pretty beautiful. And then you have your hooks up to Azure for, again, telemetry, billing, monitoring. When we were first doing our papers for AKS, we used a ton of the monitoring for Kubernetes, monitoring clusters on premises, on our stack, but using the monitoring and insights that were available up in Azure. So that's pretty awesome. So let's jump over to a quick demo here real quick. So you see here, I am looking at my portal, portal.azure.com. And here is all things Arc on the left blade here, kind of what we first talked about in that very first swim lane screen. We've got some management, we've got infrastructure, data services, app services. All of these are the usual suspects that we talked about. Now, let's jump into my lab, vcenter.saunderslab.local. There's my resource bridge right there that I deployed. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to see all these virtual machines right here listed from my ESXi host. Now, granted, I have a cluster of 1 because this is my home lab. It's about features and functionality, not performance. But I'll jump over to vSphere real quick. You see there's the exact same machine. Some lit up, some aren't. Various states of lab environment. But a few of these are blue here. What does that mean? That means they're Azure enabled. So I can Azure enable certain machines to perform features and functionality. Again, RBAC, whatever you'd like to do, policies. Now, this is pretty awesome, and I will leave you with this. I'm going to add a virtual machine. Now, I'm adding a virtual machine that's going to deploy to my vCenter environment behind my firewall in my data center. But the beauty here is I have a couple templates. So these templates show up, these templates that I created in VMware, in vCenter, show up looking just like templates that would be in Azure. So, of course, the CPU, the memory, the disk, I made it pretty simple. You see I have one Win 10 workstation and a 2019. Okay, just to show, again, features and functionality. But you can lock this down. You can provide your users as a VMware admin, locking it down to certain templates that they can only deploy. I think that's the best way to do it. And then, of course, you give it a name and you give it some admin accounts, and then you really go off and let that machine create itself. And it creates into my ESXi host. There is that resource bridge that I talked about right there. Yes, it's named as a very long GUID, but that is the resource bridge or control plane that is deployed that we talked about earlier. So that's pretty awesome. That really is the fact that you can do everything in Azure against a VMware deployment or a vCenter deployment. There's my resource pools. There's my templates right there that we talked about these. So I've got a couple enabled. That's why we saw those as templates. And this all can be locked down using the proper controls and, again, role-based access inside of Azure. You're not going to allow everybody the keys to the kingdom of all this features and functionality. However, if it's just a user that needs to create a VM every once in a while, or developers need to create VMs, this is a great way to go. Single pane of glass. So thanks for that. I'd love to show more. Happy to talk about this anytime, and appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Thanks, Rod.
All right, cool. So Rob wasn't able to attend, as you know, we can see, but he has. Can I go back? Oh, sorry, this guy. But as he mentioned in his talk, there are a few white papers that he has authored around Azure Stack and Azure Arc-enabled data services. So please go ahead and scan these, take these away. If you have any other questions about the solution, I can absolutely get you in touch with the right folks, either at Dell or at Microsoft, and we can talk more about this some other time.